Welcome to the Black Gems Dive In Podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into conversations about inclusive cultures and everything DEI. Your co-hosts are Kua and Kendra, and we're thrilled to be your hosts as we explore the crucial topics shaping our workplaces and communities today. In each episode, we'll unpack insights, share stories, and engage with experts to foster a deeper understanding of how we can create more inclusive environments where everyone feels valued and empowered.
Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
We're back for a special episode.
A special episode we are super excited about.
Yes. So we have a guest here. Normally we start off with a hot topic.
Right.
But we decided today that we'll just dive right in.
I want my hot topic.
You want your hot topic?
You want a hot topic?
Okay.
Don't try to leave me out of the hot topic.
Okay, all right.
Well, we always got a hot topic ready at the realm, right?
Yes.
So let's dive into the hot
There
topic.
we go.
Actually, before we do that, though, we got to get you to introduce yourself to the people, right? Okay. So let's do that first.
I am David Shands. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a father, a husband, trying to balance all of that stuff.
Yeah,
it's working out well, though. I think we're doing pretty good. Spend a lot of time on my business. Spend a lot of time with my family. Then I got to segment the time with my family into children, and then wife. I'm learning that as a husband, that just because I'm home doesn't mean this is like husband-wife time.
Yeah.
Managing, spending time with all three of my children individually. My 13-year-old, she be on TikTok and in her room and stuff. She ain't messing
and talking at 13.
Yeah, she ain't messing with me like that.
Ticking and talking.
She ain't messing with no adults like that. I worked at the Cheesecake Factory for 6 years, started a t-shirt brand called Sleep Is for Suckers. I don't really do apparel like that anymore, but I do more other business stuff, media, coaching, consulting, which isn't a huge part of my business, but real estate, podcasting, events.
You got all
Businesses.
the segments at this point, right?
You
trying to add some more?
No, my objective is to not have to do all this stuff one day.
Okay.
So let's just front load my life with work so that I don't have to do it later.
And that's always the balance. We always talking about this balance,
right.
As business owners, right? In terms of what does balance look like?
Yeah.
A true balance.
Yeah, I think
especially having a family, a few different businesses.
I think it's focusing on what you're focused on at the moment, and not being distracted by certain things. So when I'm focused on business, I'm not thinking about my kids. Forget them kids. I'm not thinking about them children. But when I get home, I got to focus on my kids and forget that business. I'm not worried about all that stuff right now. Right. I need to be here. My daughter, she's so special. She's 3 years old. If I have my phone in my hand, she will take the phone out of my hand, and she'll be doing it for like a year and a half.
Okay.
I love that.
Okay.
She'll take, now, Daddy. And I'm like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a good reminder.
Yeah,
that's a good reminder.
Yeah, so I don't know if balance exists, but focus does. Distraction does.
Yeah.
And you just got to limit the distractions and focus on what you're focusing on.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. So we'll dive in. Dive in. Hot topic.
Hot topic. And yesterday when we were recording, we had this whole new diversity dispatch.
Yes, and we had a little sound. But yeah, we're waiting for Jay Cruz to come out with the sound.
He's going to put us a sound in place. But we've been talking a lot about the attack on DEI, diversity and inclusion, and just how people can navigate through that, because both of us being practitioners, working in organizations that really have that focus, there's a lot of people that are struggling right now because there's this national focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and people really attacking it from all ends. So I think now half the country has bills, legislation, actually proposed legislation around anti-DEI bills. So they're actually, reducing the efforts that have been put in place since 2020.
Yep, getting rid of a lot of the offices in the colleges and universities, reallocating those funds to other engagement areas. And so you see a true attack on DEI. Those promises that were made in 2020 are now being eradicated. And so people are asking, more legislators are asking folks to double down on those initiatives. So you're seeing this tug and pull action that's happening 4 years later, for sure.
Right. And so especially, with affirmative action being rolled back not that long ago, there's a lot of conversations about what's next. We talked about like the Fearless Fund and how they're specifically trying to attack that because they have a program that is giving Black women entrepreneurs $20,000. And so they're using that same legislation. Yeah. You know your Fearless Fund folks in ATL.
All right, so okay, here we go.
Yeah,
right,
okay, let's go there.
Yep.
I have some areas of expertise. Okay.
Okay.
And politics is not one of them. And bills and stuff that's going on, it's not. I don't know. So hopefully this can be an educational area for me. And at the risk of cancellation, I don't really be knowing what's going on. Yeah. So I heard the Fearless Fund. Do I know what it is? No. Okay. Right. So, and there are people that are mad at me like, yo, you got to be more involved in politics. Well, I'll be involved in the schools and teaching our kids entrepreneurship. So that's my area. I have my area of the world that I am super passionate about, and I help my people in that space. Okay. Other spaces, I don't know. So hopefully y'all can educate me.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the Fearless Fund, right? And so this is in ATL, right? This is a fund that is specifically trying to increase women and BIPOC owners, business owners, getting them to that next level, right? And so BIPOC. So when we say BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So it's just the acronym that we use. And, we use a lot of acronyms. We use a lot of acronyms in this space. We do. Right? Like, we got to sometimes take it a step back. But essentially, they had a grant fund that was for $20,000 if you were a Black woman business owner. And they would grant you these dollars. And I think there was technical assistance that was also attached to that.
Every Black woman business owner just gets 20 grand
if you apply,
and if they say yes, this person is eligible for these funds, then yes.
Really?
Yes. But there's a lot of legislation that's saying that is reverse discrimination.
Right. So the same people that went after the affirmative action, case at Harvard, right? And so there was a case that went at Harvard to basically talk about, how they're looking at race-based applications and coming into the school. And so because they struck that down, that ultimately struck down affirmative action at the higher education level. And now they're trying to use that same bill to then strike down other areas. So if you give money, this is the example, you give money to Black women business owners, we're going to use that same legislation because there's a precedent now to then take that money, or say that it's discriminatory.
Oh, so you can create an argument.
So you create an argument
based on the same thing that gives it.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
Oh. Correct.
So that's happening, and this is why, when we talk about this diversity dispatch and really alerting people, you got to be aware of all these things that are happening behind the scenes because it might come to you at some point in time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So politics is always behind the scenes.
Did y'all get your 20,000?
I did not apply for it.
I didn't apply for that either. And honestly, I think there's there's some criteria that you have to fit in order to get that funding for that
Why
specific
get your
funding.
20,000?
Well, I got some money. I got some grants in the city of Buffalo. We can talk a little bit about that, right? Growth America.
Why y'all get the 20 though?
Well, mine wasn't 20, but it was 12,500.
There we go.
So
Come
if
on,
you're in the
put
city of
$1
Buffalo,
to it.
There are
and I'm just starting to build my business out. So
Jamil, I think you're in that mix too of that funding.
Y'all know anybody else? What funding? He got some funding. You got some funding?
He got some potential funding coming his way.
For what?
So this is City of Buffalo. They partnered with actually this building that we're in. So this is for businesses of color. And they put in front of us opportunities all the time, different grant funds that you can apply for. We got grant funding from LISC last year, what was that, $10,000? So there's money out there
you got
for
10 too? And y'all got 10? Did you get 10?
I did not.
You wasn't
I wasn't full time at that point.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. She gonna get there though.
I'm gonna get there.
So hold on. There's money out here for entrepreneurs.
There's money.
There's a lot of money out here. And there has been carve out, especially in the past couple of years. There's a lot of carve out specifically for BIPOC owned businesses, right? And so, but like we're saying, now they're attacking some of the language. So even when you're looking at colleges and universities, there's a lot of scholarships that's out there. For example, there's a local college here that had the George Floyd Scholarship, and now they have to pull that language back to say, oh, George Floyd Scholarship, we can't be using that because of the affirmative action that's happening. So even though politics is, a lot of people don't like to talk about politics, it's still the underbelly of a lot of things that's happening, and it's changing up funding, it's changing up education, it's changing up entrepreneurship, it's changing so many different fields, and so we have to be aware of it. So we always, like our diversity dispatch, telling people, hey, this is happening because it's affecting everyday lives. Right.
That is interesting.
And so if you're not up on, there's a lot of opportunities around grants right now for small Black-owned businesses, small women-owned businesses. I know Jamil is a New York State certified minority-owned business. I'm in the process of doing that. Kendra, you will be doing that.
Did somebody do yours? Or you did yours yourself?
We did ourselves.
I need somebody to do mine. There's a lot of questions, and
it's a lot. It's a lot.
I was just telling Jamil, when even on school tests, if it was open-ended questions, I'm cool. I'm just not doing it.
You're not doing it.
Yo, multiple choice.
Yeah.
I'm in it. Yo, literally in school, I just leave it blank. I don't know. Maybe it's my laziness. I don't know, but.
I mean, I need somebody.
Yes, I need somebody to help me with.
Well, so there are programs that help you, right? Like the Beverly Gray has a program that will help you. The Small Business Association has another one. So there's programs and pockets around that actually help you with technical assistance on that. I think the Urban League too.
Urban League does it. Yeah.
Urban League
does
it.
This is a really good conversation. I'm about to go start looking for money.
So yeah.
And you know why? I think the reason I don't know this stuff is I've just done everything myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so even I'm doing an event. Last year I did an event, and I'm used to just paying for it. And I calculate the numbers. If I put out this amount, I sell this many, whatever, I'll get this back. So that's been my entire career. But there's people on the other side who they do an event, and the whole thing is paid for before they sell a ticket.
Absolutely.
But I'm so. Like, it's just, I just go. So,
and sometimes I think as Black people, especially, you know, we do what we have to do. We roll up our sleeves, you know, we get into the mud, right, to make some stuff happen. But the reality is, and we often talk about this on the podcast, right? There's the thing called the network gap. Based on your zip code, you can determine how successful you would potentially be, right? If you're around people who are very affluent and have access to resources, means, relationships, you're going to go a lot further. And so they can track that down to zip code now. Same thing, we talk about it from a healthcare perspective, like life expectancy, you can determine that based on zip code as well. But if you're in a zip code that you don't have a lot of, you know, folks that have money or resources, your likelihood of even having resources and information around things like this is not going to be there, right? So that's why we always try to get different opportunities and talk about, you know, tap in. Yeah, it's some resources out there for you. It is.
Yeah. So I guess the question is too, when we're talking about entrepreneurship, a lot of times we talk about, you know, financial pathways to success, right? And we talk about from our communities, how can we continue to just grow in terms of financial prosperity? And I guess my question back to you is, what made you get into entrepreneurship? I know you talked about, you know, starting your own T-shirt line, but what made you get into entrepreneurship and then building out all these businesses that you have?
Can I answer it with a question to you?
Yes, absolutely.
What made you not get into entrepreneurship early on?
Oh, that's a good question. I was scared because it's what you know, right? It's when you're younger, you're groomed for that 9 to 5. We talk about generations a lot on this podcast, and we talk about, you know, my parents taught us to go to school, get that job, come home, and do what you got to do, right? And so entrepreneurship is not, you know, we were taught it's not stable, right? It's a grind, it's a hustle culture, and this is something that you want to do. So for me, it was ingrained in early that this is maybe something you don't want to do, and it's a scary place to be in, right?
Okay, well, my answer is no one told me that was a bad thing.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I did it. My dad was an entrepreneur, never really made a whole bunch of money, but I mean, I saw him do it, and nobody. The idea, and I don't know if entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur is like you're either born that way or you have to be taught. I don't know, but I'm going down the street, and I'm coming home, and I see all of these leaves on the lawn. So when I get home, my dad says, "You got to rake the leaves." Yeah. So I rake the leaves and I put them in piles. And he says, "Well, you got to put them in bags." I said, "Okay, no problem. I'll put them in a bag." Not no problem. I didn't like to do that, but because I'm thinking as soon as I'm done and I put them in piles, I'm going to play with my friends. But my dad's like, "You got to take the leaves, you got to put them in a bag. You put the bag on the corner so that the trash man can take them." Well, after I'm done my lawn, I'm looking at all of my neighbors, and they got leaves on the lawn. Now, I'm a kid, and I'm into colors, and I think it's really pretty that you have a bunch of colors on your lawn. But I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if my neighbor likes the fact that there are leaves on her lawn. Okay. So something made me grab my rake and walk over there and say, "Hey, do you like the fact that there's leaves on your lawn?" I like them. No offense. They're pretty to me, but I can remove these leaves for you if you want. And the lady says, "Yeah, sure. How much you going to charge me?" I'm like, "I ain't get that far. My dad just makes me do it for free." So I think the lady might have been like, all right, I give you $20 for the front and back. I'm like, what? I'm calculating all the candy, and we had a $1 menu at McDonald's at times. 20 nuggets. Let's go.
I'm crying.
I don't know what made me think to myself, maybe I could do that for some money. So I did it, and it worked. Yeah. So ever since I can remember, my mind moves to, like, even in snow days, y'all know snow up here. You have to have a lot of snow to not go to school, though.
Yeah.
In Atlanta, if
now, not back then. We had
if you got white grass, it's over with. You don't have to go to school, right? But in New Jersey, where I grew up, you gotta have a lot. So once we see on the bottom of the TV that our school number was picked, you have to look at the news.
Yeah,
and you
like
see
a
the
ticker,
school
like
number,
the NBA, like the NBA game.
And once you see a school number, we're out of school. My phone rings, friends like, yo, let's play football, because there's no better football than football in the snow. Okay?
That's what they say, I guess.
It's
right?
lit. Jamel, you ever play football in the snow? No better way to play. But something in my brain says, my parents still have to go to work. My neighbors still got to go to work. Even though we're out of school, they pave the streets and they got to go to work.
Yeah.
So I'm shoveling snow out of people's driveways and sidewalks. But my point is, I don't know what makes my friend's brain say, oh, snow day, out of school, let's play. Yeah. And my brain says, oh, snow day, I can make some money.
Opportunity for some money.
So I've always been, so when you ask what made you be an entrepreneur, I'm like, it just makes sense. I'm trying to understand why people love a job so much. I don't get, that don't make sense to me. It doesn't like compute in my brain that this is not a good thing to do or not the thing to do. So.
Yeah.
I know my story is a little different in that way, because I was exposed, I think, through a former job. They had like accelerators and programs that people were going through, but you would see the type of people going through it, and not, no judgment from that perspective, but for me, that, we're both competitive, right? Yes. Played sports, all that. And I'm like, if that person can do it, I know I can do it better, right? Yeah. And so even from that lens, it was being exposed to that realm, the type of things that people were doing. But then, for me, it was a 9 to 5, trying to get to that highest height. So I got to a C-suite level, did that for a while. You get the operation side, how businesses operate. And now I'm like, okay, I can go and consult and do it for myself. Do it for myself. And that's kind of, that's a short version.
Yes.
Short version of the story. But
operating without limits. That's what it comes down to, right? It's like, something I talk about all the time. I just started another business called Out of Bounds, and what do you do when you operate without limits, right? And so that's one of the things where we talk about all the time, like, there are people, communities, parents, whoever, put these limitations on you, right? Yeah. But what happens when you operate without those limits, right? Or your mind says, I can go and rake those leaves, or I can go and shovel that snow, right? You know nothing else but to operate in that.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
Because
we getting personal.
Might get friction here.
Okay, getting deep.
So you have this mindset that you can build whatever you think of now, right? But you leaving your job wasn't your choice.
Right.
Which means if your job and you didn't separate, you'd still be there. And you maybe wouldn't have this mindset. So did you develop this mindset with your back against the wall? Because this is, I'm out now. I might as well have this mindset of I'm free.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So I actually started my consulting business part-time well before couple months ago. So I started it back in 2020. And so for me, I started doing, working with businesses and non-for-profits, doing a lot of work in the DEI field. And so I've always had this mindset of one day, I will get out of the 9 to 5 grind and do it myself. And now I'm just like, well, better time, right? Why jump right into another 9 to 5? Someone asked me recently, they said, how many jobs did you apply to? None. Because I don't want to, right? Because I'm like, I know what it looks like where you're helping another company, somebody else, with their success and their metrics and their goals. Why not do it for myself, right? And so I have all of that background. And so now it's time for me, to take the leap and do it.
Well, keep going.
Yes.
Because, so you left when?
About a month ago.
Which means you probably got some money. So right now it's like, why not? Why not? I'm going after my dream. I'm not going back to get another job. But entrepreneurship is tough.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work out, the reason we feel this way is because we see some money in the account. Oh, we got a little cushion. We straight.
Yeah.
I ain't got to apply right now.
Right.
But there may be a time in I don't know, near future, whatever, where you're like, ooh, that account.
It's looking low.
It's looking a little low. Maybe I put a little application, a small application somewhere.
So small application.
A little application.
This is what I always say, though, right? As you continue to, as you continue to work, whether it's in your 9-to-5 or build your business, 3 things that I always think about, right, is number 1, make sure that you have your money intact. So whether that is a savings, right? So that's something that I've always invested into savings, your skill set, and your network.
I like that.
Those are 3 things that are invaluable. Those are 3 things that you will continue to build. So when there is a time that you leave your job, you have those 3 things, right? I mean, now the savings may one day dwindle, right? But at least if you have those savings, your skills, and your network,
she got the network.
You can work towards it.
Already, I'm like, girl, if you ever need a contract, anything on the side, we got it, right? We're in the expansion mode right now. And so I think even from...
Just let me know. I need contracts.
Well, we got to teach you what DEI is.
For sure.
First. Yes. Right?
First off, I know what DEI is, okay? I know what it is, right? I don't know what it is, but I know what it stands for. I know what it stands for.
Okay, at least you know what it stands for, because there's people that are turning it around. We just talked about this in the last podcast. They're saying didn't earn it is what DEI stands for. This is a lot of right-wing rhetoric that's coming out at this point. So
okay, what do you think?
What do we think? I mean, I think, we talked about it, right? We don't talk about it when it relates to legacy, admissions into schools. That means my dad was rich. He went to the school. His, son went. Now my son can go. We don't talk about that from a didn't earn it perspective, right? It only happens when it's a person of color or someone deemed, you're less than.
Right.
We often talk about that as it relates to diversity and inclusion as well, as people think, that means you're going to hire the person just because they're a woman or because they're black. But the reality is you still have to meet those qualifications.
Yes.
We're just opening the door because there's been instances, and we talk about this. I had a client who was only allowing interns from a certain private school to come into that company. What does that look like? Right? So didn't earn it, you had the right relationship, and that goes back to that right network, right? So I think for us, we look at it from a different vantage point. It's opening the door and allowing more people access to opportunity versus, just because you show up as yourself, you get in. You know?
Gotcha. I mean, but there were a lot of organizations that got money because it was cool to give money to black
people. For sure. Of course.
So,
and that was performative.
Right.
In a lot of stances, right? Like, okay, George Floyd, we all watched this happen on TV.
Yeah.
Everybody, there was a lot of guilt that was happening around that time. And we often talked about it. Get in now. That's your foot in the door, right? So we use that as a foot in the door. But guess what? That's not the only space that we can consult in because we have all this other experience, right? Yeah. So that's how we've navigated.
It's a really good conversation to have.
Especially
because I'm not like super privy to it. So I'm coming from a perspective of no one ever gave me anything. So even when I hear some people talking about what they don't have and all of the limitations, I understand the limitations are there, but for someone like me, it's going to sound like an excuse. You know what I mean? Because I was a server at the Cheesecake Factory and I just grinded and I grinded. And there's countless people who came from nothing. They didn't let the thing stop them. And and I'm so glad that I didn't work in a corporate space, because from what I hear is it's really hard being a woman, especially a black woman, or just being black, period. So you got the politics where you have to work 5 times harder to get half the respect of somebody who's doing the same job. But because I've never experienced that, I don't see it. You know what I mean? It's not like a thought in my mind, but someone who did go through that, at every turn, they see how they are being discriminated against, which ultimately keeps them from growing, period. So I think this is a touchy conversation to have, because I don't want to sound insensitive, especially to our people, because we are 400 years behind, right? But at the same time, we can't keep living with excuses.
And I think, because my old role, I used to oversee HR and DEI initiatives and health equity in a healthcare organization. But, you would see when the inflection point for decisions, when decisions needed to be made, and who was making that decision.
Right.
And in a lot of instances, because we had conversations, we used to do training, you would see someone who was white who was making a decision, and maybe it was two people, say two people had the same exact situation, you would see disparate outcomes based on who was making that decision. So we talk about bias often, not only on the podcast, but in this space. And why we do this work is implementing policies so that people have to go back to something that has more of a fair way of thinking around it. Because if you leave it to people's own devices, whatever bias you come into is going to be perpetuated throughout the organization, right? And so that's how we would see it. You would actually see that happen.
Yeah. I mean, bias is our blind spot, right? So we talk about that all the time. You don't know that you have bias when you when you walk into certain situations.
Yeah.
But the competitive nature, and we get that too. It's not like you're asking for a handout. It's a hand up to opportunity, right? Just creating space for people to be able to show up and show up as your best self without the worry of that type of, discriminatory practices.
It's a good conversation.
Yeah. And I always say too, like now in this world of DEI, right, where you're seeing a lot of people being laid off in these positions, a lot of opportunities and just different programs being eliminated, right? It is a time for us to now infiltrate in different spaces so that we can continue to expand our network, whether it's from an entrepreneur standpoint or whether it's from a 9-to-5 standpoint. It's like, this is not the only thing that we can do, right? So we have to continue to expand in these areas. So
yeah, and I think we often talk about just the space and the opportunities that exist, but I think ultimately there's a lot more women of color specifically coming out and starting their own businesses because they're like, you know what, we're leaving that
It's
behind.
traumatizing.
Right.
I would say it is It is traumatizing. I mean, I have not been working in a corporate space for a long time because I'm still young, y'all. However, the time that I have, it is traumatizing. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know, right? So you think this is the norm. You go into these spaces and this is the norm, right? You're taught, at least I was taught, right? What you were saying about how you have to work double as hard to get half of what your counterparts get. And this is what you're taught, right? And you're just like, you just got to face it. But do I? Do I have to go through that? Right.
You don't.
Right. But now I know, right?
And we're choosing not to.
Exactly.
Right? And so, so more to come.
Yes.
You'll have to come back and visit us in terms of what happens in the future. We're on our own journeys and paths,
Absolutely.
Parallel journeys, but also working together, obviously, through the podcast. But I don't think we told you, we always ask our guests to leave a gem of the day. So what would you leave the people? Something that could be,
thought-provoking,
inspirational. What you been thinking about?
Raking those leaves when you get back.
Absolutely. Right? Just go after it. Go after it. And just go after it. I mean, there are people that are afraid to go after it because of what might happen. But the regret weighs so heavy. We only have a short period of time on this earth, right? So I don't ever want to say, I wish I would have, or like there are these people who at the end of their lives, they're saying, man, I could have done this and this and that, and they just never did it. And you have no idea. I'm telling you, failure doesn't hurt as bad as you think it is. It's like it's more scary in your head than it is actually when it happens.
That's true.
So go after it. Do not be one of those people who wonder what your life could have been like. At least. This is my rationale. I'm going to sit around my grandkids and I'm going to tell them a bunch of cool stories about what happened. Whether I won or lost, whether it was up or down, I'm gonna have a bunch of cool stories about me going after it. I don't care if every story is about, I tried this, but let me tell you how I failed. It was tragic. Versus not having anything to say, like, yo, these were the thoughts I was gonna have. This is what I was gonna do. This is what I wanted to do. Man, I just one good idea, and then I just never did it. That, like, your grandkids aren't gonna love you for that. Like, yo, I don't want to talk to grandpa no more. He got boring stories. But let's talk about the stories of the trauma. Let's go. And I'll feel at the end of the day that I gave it my all. I am so glad what happened to you because now we get to create cool stories about this struggle and this fight. My kids will never, ever be able to say, Daddy ain't try. Daddy went after it. Win, lose, or draw. I'm going. I just want cool stories at the end of the day.
I love that.
That's dope.
Risk
That's
taker.
dope. Right?
Love it.
So, listen, thank you for coming on.
Thanks
it was
for
great
having
to
me.
meet you.
Yes.
We're looking forward to the conversation tomorrow. We
Yeah.
will be in attendance
it's gonna be good.
to
it's
that
gonna be a
as
good
well,
one.
right? Anything you want to tell the people in terms of how to find you on socials?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, go to podcastsummit.com, podcastsummit.com. I don't know when you're watching this, but we have a podcast summit coming up.
Right.
Okay? Podcastsummit.com, just check it out. It is the only event of its kind, especially hosted by someone that looks like me, has actually accomplished something in the space and actually knows how to teach it, so much so that I got other examples of people that I've helped grow their podcast and grow their brand and grow their business online. So there's nowhere else you can go. There's nowhere else you can run to get this information for how to grow a business in this particular podcasting space. So go to podcastsummit.com. Follow me on Instagram. Sleep is 4 suckers with the number 4. And make sure you go to your podcast app, whether it's Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and type in Social Proof Podcast. If you are an entrepreneur, this is going to be what you need to grow as an entrepreneur.
Awesome. Well, thank
you. We appreciate you.
Yes.
And welcome to Buffalo.
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
Bye.
Peace, y'all.